This is the politics of everything, and I'm your host, Amber Daines. Welcome to the podcast where we want to discuss the politics of everything, from money to motherhood, nutrition to narcissism, startups to secularism, the environment to equality, and much more. Our guests are experts in their field or topic of choice, even if you've not yet heard their name. This is a bipartisan podcast, so while we love exploring varied views and get a buzz from a healthy debate, by no means is this a one-sided forum for any one political view. So please listen up and enjoy the politics of everything. In episode 26, we're getting to know Jacqui Ma, who's a UK-based trend forecaster and designer specialising in the world of accessories. She spent 8 years as director of accessories at the world's leading fashion trend forecasting company, WGSN, before starting her own consultancy called Trendfields. Consulting to brands as diverse as Amazon Fashion through to advertising agencies such as B&B, Jacqui works closely with brands to combine future consumer insights with actionable recommendations and designs. She's also the founder of Goodordering, an East London bag company that has lifestyle cycling accessories that she started from her own kitchen table 5 years ago. She designs bags for fashion-conscious, non-lycra-clad cyclists. Jacqui's going to get us skilled up today on the politics of trends. Welcome, Jacqui.
Hello, how are you?
Really good. So let's go back a little bit, maybe 20 odd years ago, to your first career. So before you kind of delved into the world of design and fashion in Australia, you actually did a different degree, I believe, in business and manufacturing. So could you tell us a little bit about that and what that perhaps taught you in those early days?
Yeah, well, I guess coming from a second-generation Chinese family, studying design right from high school probably wasn't really an option. My parents were pretty serious about, what kind of jobs were, real jobs and versus, jobs that you probably weren't able to make that much money in. So I did a business degree. Kind of things that it taught me were, just really practical skills like accounting, which I failed twice, but also just the importance of the practical side of running businesses. So, we learned everything from, organizational behavior and all that kind of stuff to like business ethics. And I think it kind of got me started in the seriousness of sort of, running a business and all the kinds of things that you'd have to think about.
Absolutely. And I guess a lot of people who are interested in design and fashion and maybe more creative entities don't have that backing. So perhaps it sort of set you up for the future. So thinking a little bit about shifting gears, you obviously then decided to carve out quite a different career and you've had a good amount of years in accessories. So why did you choose this area versus sort of maybe more broadly speaking, women's fashion or other areas of design?
Well, I guess when I went back to university after doing the business degree, I studied industrial design. Well, it's kind of an old-fashioned word for sort of product design. So I studied product design and then I moved to London from Australia. And the first jobs that I got were actually designing quite hard products like toilets and in trays for desks and really like traditional product designing kind of things. And then it's not that I really wanted to get into fashion, but I was yearning for something that was like a quicker turnaround than like, an airline interior, which was one of the projects I worked on, which you might never ever see the final product. So part of me really wanted to work on something that I could see myself just after maybe a few months or like a season. So that was when I got into designing luggage and bags. So my first projects were luggage. And then from luggage, it went more into like slightly smaller bags. And then I worked for Puma, which was sports bags. And then from Puma, that's when I started working at WGSN, where it was all about sort of, accessories and bags in general. So I guess it was a little bit of a sliding scale into the fashion world, even though I'd come from a product background.
That's so interesting. So I guess in terms of bags, you must know everything about what makes a great bag work and what doesn't.
Yeah, I guess over the years I've kind of learned everything because one of the things that I did was go to the factories a lot with my early jobs. So, we would, be designing the bags based on what the customer wanted, but then we would also be learning a lot about what was feasible, what was not feasible, the latest technologies in handle mechanisms, exciting stuff. But most
very important though, that handle breaks when you're at an airport. That's not going to help anybody.
Yeah, exactly. And just like how the industry works and how you don't design every single thing from scratch. You use a lot of the stuff that's already out there to build on. And the most important thing, I guess, is finding out about other brands that are in the industry. So really learning a lot by all the other brands that are out there and what they're doing.
So there's a bit of nepotism in that as well, because I guess, it's partly when we see trends, for example, you go to social media or you buy a traditional glossy magazine and you see these images from the catwalks of Paris or New York showcasing really specific trends every year, such as, might be stacked heel boots one year, a bit of distressed denim, or even crossbody bags have been very big in the past couple of years for women. So how does that sort of seasonal trend get to be decided? Is there some way in which it happens?
Well, it's a little bit of give and take. So trends, I kind of think of them as they're either trickle down or ground up. So the trickle down trends come from, top designers and influencers, celebrities, and, like a more kind of organized fashion structure. So they're the ones that sort of come down from the catwalks down to the high street. And then you've got ground up trends, which come from, street culture or, like music, film, and just what people are wearing at festivals and things like that. So before, traditionally, it used to be way more a high percentage of trickle down trends. But now we're seeing that actually with Instagram and influencers and celebrities being so influential, that trends are coming from all different directions. So I guess in a way it's a bit of a nightmare for trend forecasters because they have to look really outside the traditional ways that they used to forecast trends.
It almost seems like it could be a never-ending story, really, of trends. You could probably be searching forever and find something that's trending, particularly with different markets and, different age groups and so forth. So for you in your role, how do you decide which trends matter most? Is it about the demographics, who's going to buy the products?
Yeah, well, basically, I think what it's come down to is that you really need to start with exactly what you said, the customer. So you have to figure out who you're actually working out these trends for. So it's not really as simple as sort of putting out a report and saying, it's all about pointed toes, because there's a whole bunch of people who will never, buy into those trends. So basically, I think it's just about first knowing who the consumer is, who you're designing for, what brands they're into, all the other stuff that they're into, and then thinking about the trends for like very, very specific market segments. So it's a lot more kind of niche, and it's something that even companies are having their own internal trend forecasting teams now, because they've just realized that it's so much more about them and their customers than any kind of like larger trend.
Interesting. So one micro aspect, I guess, of design is obviously colour. Colour is really important. And I know Pantone every year have a colour. I think this year it's greenery, some kind of green colour that has been decided by Pantone. So why does colour matter so much when it comes to accessories, or doesn't it? Say, I know for interiors, for example, you see certain colourways which will work, or even women's clothing. I know in Australia at the moment it's all about dusty pink for summer and into, winter as well. And I guess, does colour make a difference when it comes to accessories, or do we just like black bags?
Well, yeah. I mean, people do buy black stuff, and a lot of brands, do explore these whole colour stories only to sell 80% of their bags in black. But actually, I think the tables are turning a little bit. And actually, my personal opinion is that colour in accessories is even more important, because in times where, in recession, where people are kind of just buying black coats and black, or dark or safer colorways in terms of their clothing, the accessories are the kind of treat that they might buy to update their wardrobe. So it might not just be thinking about leather bags. It could be headbands, it could be scarves, it could be belts, and all different kinds of accessories. So I think that in accessories, it's definitely a really, really key area for updating wardrobes and kind of adding newness into people's wardrobes, especially now when people are getting a bit sick of fast fashion. Interesting.
So I guess as a trends consultant, what do you do on a daily basis?
Well, I used to pretend that it was like, the best job in the world. I just sit around reading magazines all day. But a kind of typical week, I guess, or a typical day might encompass during catwalks or press season, going to press days. It might be going to trade shows and reporting back on trade shows. A lot of the time it might be saying, okay, we need 5 reports done on, the latest hardware trends in footwear, and you have to sort of research different buckles and really specific things like that. So it depends on what aspect you're looking at in terms of trends. So we do things like macro trends, which might be looking at trends 2 years in advance. So we're looking at, film and celebrity and politics and those kind of trends where you'll research like the bigger shifts in society. But all the way through to, is it rose gold or is it yellow gold that's going to be key for studs in shoes or something really specific? So I guess it kind of comes down to like how close to the season that you happen to be working on. And in trend forecasting, sometimes even the teams are divided up. So you'll have teams who are only working on 6-month turnaround fashion or even 3 months. And then you'll have teams kind of focusing on a slightly bigger picture so that they can work out what the bigger shifts are going on.
How fascinating. So I guess with the market, you mentioned fast fashion before, and I think it's really changed the way in which we consume accessories and all sorts of fashion in some ways. And even though a lot of people are sort of fatiguing of it, it is still really big. I know that, where we are in Australia, we only recently in the last few years got H&M and Zara and Uniqlo and so forth. And they seem to be the stores that are packed full of people at lunchtime in the city. So how has that changed the way in which we cycle through fashion in terms of trends?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about fast fashion is dead and that, but you're right. When if you go into an office with a load of, young women professionals, really, like in London anyway, you've got ASOS bags coming in 5 times a day being delivered. And this is the thing, is that we just can't really help but to want to experiment with how we, look and the silhouettes, and people are becoming a lot more interested in fashion because of bloggers and vloggers and Instagram. I know like in London now, it's all everything is off the shoulder. And maybe like 6 months ago or a year ago, people just wouldn't necessarily buy into that kind of, that silhouette. And even for some people, it doesn't even suit them. But the idea is that we're so fascinated to find, to be part of that gang and to be seen to be taking part in it's like a cultural thing. It's not just about fashion. So you're right. I mean, I don't really know what the kind of answer is. I think what it really has to start with is that the retailers, like the brands, need to be more responsible in what they're dishing out to the consumers, rather than, rely on the consumers themselves. Because ultimately fashion, it's a little bit like crack. People are going to want to, be a part of that and find out, and I guess it also comes to the different age groups as well.
Absolutely, and I think you're right. I mean, we had a program recently in Australia where you probably haven't seen it, but it was all about the war on waste, and it was produced by our national broadcaster, the ABC, and it really got a lot of people talking about that idea of all sorts of waste, but fashion was one of them. They had one episode on fashion, and there was a couple of, I guess, young girls in their 20s, and one of them basically said she bought something new every day.
Oh.
And because of Instagram, she would never wear the same thing twice. And I just was such an eye-opener. And what messages does that send, and what responsibility, I guess, do we have as a society to kind of go, well, actually, how many black tops can you possibly buy, or, off-the-shoulder trends or whatever it might be at the time. But it was totally, in some ways, mortifying to hear that that's how people, because it's only $14 for the top. Why wouldn't I buy one every day? I live at home. I earn a good income. And you can understand how, like you say, it's like a drug. The companies can sort of feed that drug.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think there are other things coming in that will help change the landscape a little bit, like with this whole sharing economy and people starting to, realize the power of sharing and borrowing. And we're moving in millennials are way more into, accepting that. So hopefully we'll see these models shift and people will be able to get newness and satisfy those cravings, but we can reduce the waste aspect of it.
Absolutely. So thinking a little bit more about the company you started, Goodordering, how did you actually start that?
Well, I guess I was living on top of a bike shop, and I was working in trends and fashion, and I had been designing prior to that. So then when I was working at WGSN, I don't actually design anything. I just sort of create reports and you don't really get that satisfaction of feeling a physical product in your hand. So that was when I started Goodordering. I sort of had a craving to design bags again myself. And by then I'd made enough contacts in manufacturing and found out enough about, what the production process is like, that I decided to design my own kind of very small range of bags, which were 4 styles, which were all about the rise of urban cycling. So in London and, cities all around the world, people are starting to get back onto their bicycles and use them to commute. And I thought there was a bit of a gap in the market for, colourful or basically not black bags for professional people who wanted to cycle to work. So yeah, that's when I designed that range, and I launched it with a Kickstarter campaign, which was able to fund the first production.
How much did you raise to start that initial capsule collection?
The first was, it was something like £14,000.
Wow, that's significant.
I'd put some money aside, so I think I had 14,000 or so saved up as well. So I just needed to make the other half, and so I pre-sold the bags so people could buy them at kind of half price if they pre-ordered them before they were actually made. And it was a really good way to start the business because I was able to see what people would want before actually getting them made. So I could, manufacture what most of the colours that most people chose as their rewards on Kickstarter. So yeah, it was a kind of low risk way of starting the business. And then obviously Kickstarter's really big now, and it's helping a lot of smaller businesses get off. Get started.
Definitely, it's a great way to get some initial seed funding. Yeah. But you've kept the business and your career going at the same time. So how's that managed to kind of work? How do you blend the two?
Well, I think that it's very much about blending. So when my son Otto was a baby, we would he probably couldn't understand what I was saying, but I would sort of say, okay, we're doing one thing for you and then we're going to do one thing for me. So it was always a bit of a team effort that, right down to what we did every day. So I think that it was very much it kept me sane as a parent, but then it kept me being, quite a decent parent because I had something else that I was also focusing on. So my whole focus wasn't, is Otto eating his vegetables, 3 times a day? This sounds a bit harsh, but I didn't care as much because I had other stuff, going on in my life. So I think it was just a team effort.
The business kept you sane, as you said, and I guess it was probably a good time to do it when you were physically at home, perhaps a bit more than you would be if you're doing the traditional corporate career at the time. So with the business, what do you hope to do with it? What's next? You've obviously expanded the range and there's some fantastic kids bags, which we've bought as well. So how do you sort of keep evolving your own business? Because it's very different to having a team of people, maybe in a big consultancy environment. It's just really, I guess, you.
Yeah. I guess that I'm sort of planning my way into working on Goodordering more. So I still don't work on it full time now, but I do have people who help me with certain things. So I really rely on, outside people to help me with everything from shipping and logistics to the legal stuff to the accounting. And luckily, society's structured now that a lot of people are freelance. So you can really, run a business using experts in lots of different fields. So I guess when I started it, maybe a year or so ago, if someone had asked me, I really thought that it was this big business that I was going to sell for millions at one point in time. But when I've been really, at those moments when I've been really realistic with myself, what I realize is that I actually really love it. And I kind of would rather think of it as a really successful money generating hobby than a big business that is going to change the world. So I've taken the pressure off it. So I don't put pressure on the business. It has to do this or that. I have targets and goals and all that kind of thing, of course, but I've kind of just eased off on putting pressure on it and realized that actually I really do enjoy it. So, and I'm learning a lot every single day from doing it. So yeah, I guess that's the key for me to be able to work on it and still be passionate.
That's great. So thinking a little bit about the ethics of trends, your job obviously involves working perhaps globally across all different kinds of economies and, perhaps going to factories in China and so forth. Do you get much involvement with the process of how our accessories are actually made? So, things like access to ethical manufacturers or, places that might use child labour. How does that sit with what you're doing?
Well, yeah, for me, it's really important to understand the whole manufacturing process. So, with Goodordering, I do go to the factory once or twice a year, and I document it, and I write blog posts that are on my site about showing the photos that I've taken at the factory. So that's really important for me. I think there is a huge piece of work to be done, to do with getting factories and things audited and people's responsibilities there, but it's something that I personally haven't delved further into aside from my own factories. But one of the other things is that there is a misconception about how dire and how bad some factories are in different countries, and from my own personal experience, it really isn't that bad. And I found myself really defending, when people would be looking at my bags at a trade show and ask, where is this made? I would find myself kind of slightly embarrassingly saying it's made in China. So one of the things that I've really had to try to do is to really stand up for my factories and not feel like there's a taboo or a shame with things that aren't made, in the UK or locally made. Because even though I do think it's great to have things locally made, and I do have a range of bags that are made in the UK, ultimately, I also want my brand to be accessible. So if I want to be able to sell a bag for £65 and for people to be able to buy it, if you do the maths, you can't physically get that made. I probably couldn't even get, a tiny little coin pouch made for that price to sell it in the UK. So it's kind of being practical as well.
People do vote with their wallets. I often think that, even in terms of, I have bought things and continue to buy things maybe from the fast fashion outlets, not every day, clearly, but, do buy things because at the end of the day, it's what you can afford and you decide you will pay for a product. Mm-hmm. And that's, to be successful, that has to meet in the middle with what I guess the producers are actually supplying as well.
Yeah.
So what sort of hacks have you learned to become that sort of, I guess, successful accessories expert? Are there any kind of key learnings that you could share with us about, what makes the business work for you?
Well, on the kind of trend forecasting side, I think that just being naturally inquisitive and being opportunistic all the time. So, looking at new brands and noting them down and having systems where you can actually remember things, because obviously there's so much going on. So I do have little systems like, Google Sheets where I kind of just note down, new brands that I want to keep an eye on, things like that. Don't trust that, making systems for yourself is definitely a good one. When I've been giving advice to other people who want to get into the trend forecasting industry, what I say to them is don't wait. If you want to forecast trends, then just start doing it now. People can do it through writing a blog or starting a certain Instagram based on that. So a lot of people sort of wait to do these kind of things. But I think that it's a process that you can kind of train yourself right from the beginning. Yeah, in terms of just hacks in life in general, it's pretty much like coming up with little systems to remember things, having...
What would be a good example of a system that maybe you wouldn't have had when you maybe started Goodordering that you would definitely swear by now that you couldn't live without?
Okay, so, well, I have multiple...
Or any programs or apps that you use. I'm always curious to know with successful people, what are their little top three things they have going on in a day?
Yeah, so Instagram is a really big thing for me. And also when I'm busy or when you can have, a few moments here and there, I really believe that don't wait until you've got half an hour or an hour. The amount of things that you can get done in 10 slots of 1 minute is actually really big. So I have Instagram accounts that I kind of use for the different things. And then based on the things, the brands that I follow, that's kind of a little system. And then it's really basic, but just using sort of the iCloud and Google Notes. So if I take a picture of something on my phone, because I don't have loads of memory on my phone, I'm hooked up to Google Drive on my phone and I have loads of subfolders. So if I take a picture, rather than leaving it on my camera, I'll upload it directly onto the appropriate Google Drive where I can look at on my computer later on. Yeah, and I even do it with receipts. So if I'm on expenses and I take a photo of the post off, everything is doing it right there and then. And one person said to me, when you have your to-do list, if you've got anything on your to-do, if you're about to write something on your to-do list that will take you less than 2 minutes, don't write it down, just do it right there and then. And I'm sure people, you could kind of argue the opposite as well. But I guess just using my phone as a way to funnel off bits of information into the right place at the right time. The other hack that I use is it's a program called If This Then That, IFTT, and you can set they're called recipes or formulas. So, for example, one of them is like every time I take a photo, it puts it on Pinterest. I mean, that's a bit extreme. And you can nominate a certain Pinterest board, or you could say every time I post something on Instagram, it will post it as a proper picture on Facebook as well. So you can do all these things that save time. You can even set alarms. Like I used to set a radius from work. Whenever I leave a certain radius from work, it will text my partner saying, Jacqui is on her way home now. And that will save me, 2 minutes of writing to my partner, I'm on my way home now, which I found I was doing the same thing every single day. So it sounds a bit like, geeky, but like there's certain things that you can just automate. And I really feel like just being able to steal like a few minutes here and there, that's when you can, you get things going. And that's what's helped me
really,
multitask.
You don't have to do when you get home means that I guess you can be focused on your family or whatever you want to be doing socially, and not be thinking about all the work stuff that might be building up.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer that people don't sort of get to where they are without some sort of mentors or inspirational figures, either formally or informally in their lives, that they've kind of drawn inspiration from or been taught along the way. Do any come to mind for you that you think of fondly and that you can kind of share with us what they taught you?
Well, yeah, I've got, they're not always really specific people, but more recently, there's a woman called Emma Jones, who's the founder of a company called Enterprise Nation, who helps startups, especially in the UK. It's all about they run this huge festival called Festival of Female Entrepreneurs, and then do these trade missions, one of which I'm going on this weekend to New York. And it's all about helping small businesses. And in all the kind of interactions that I've had with her, one of the things that I've learned from her is that you've just got to put yourself out there and sell yourself. Any opportunity that you have to plug yourself or your brand, not in a really, obviously you have to do it in an appropriate, tasteful way, but don't be shy and don't think that people are going to come to you and knock on your door and say, Jacqui, would you like to be featured in, the Sunday Times? You've got to actually get out there and try to sell yourself. And that's one thing that I think women have a lot of trouble with. And all the kind of women figures, that I've kind of come across that can do that in a very balanced way, I just have so much respect for them. And that's kind of how I would like to be myself.
That's great advice. I think sometimes you're right, we do shy away from it, and my career's in PR, so I'm all for people putting themselves out there, but it doesn't just happen by osmosis. You're right. People generally have to actually put themselves front and center, and I guess willing to be a bit vulnerable in that too, and, share their story as much as the success stuff, all the other bits and pieces that come with that journey. So if we could just finish off by sharing perhaps your top sort of insights for listeners who are keen to understand how to get ahead in the politics of trends. Is there any crystal ball? Is there any sort of top 3 trends we need to be thinking about, or any advice that you would have for anyone interested in your line of work?
Well, I guess in trends and like in kind of design in general, the key things are to distill the data that you're kind of being fed every single day. So if you can kind of start to have an opinion about things and, summarize things in your head. So say you're walking down the street and you see all these different things, you could turn around to your friend and say, you know what, I'm noticing a lot more red, in fashion these days, or why is this whole thing about off the shoulders? Where do you think it's going? I think that next summer is going to be dead. Like making conclusions and really trying to distill information like in little bits and pieces where you can will start to help you realize that you've got an opinion, and that opinion is really important, and that you're actually analyzing things rather than just absorbing stuff. And I think that is really the key, because I actually, with all this social media and everything going on, what we're becoming really bad at is filtering and having opinions about stuff.
No, that's great advice. Well, if you do want to connect further with Jacqui, I'll have some details of Goodordering, her business, and her LinkedIn profile on the show notes. You've been listening to The Politics of Everything. Until next time, keep well. Thanks for listening today. If you've enjoyed The Politics of Everything, we thrive on feedback. So please add a short review and share the podcast with your network, your friends and family. I'm also always on the hunt for fabulous new guests, so if you've got a view to share and an idea how to get our listeners excited, please email me at amber@bespokecomms, that's BESPOKECOMMS.com.au, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Until next time.